I'm sure some folks will want to pay attention to, or view this later. So for those who are new to this, this is a peer critique event. We do these periodically. We've started them up. Well, we started last summer, I think, as an experiment, and then we've done a couple this season, and it's generally been well received. But so the idea here is that this you can submit up to 2 images, and we'll look at them here. I've stripped all the file names from the files. And so if there are embedded watermarks, I didn't bother removing those, obviously. So if the artist left them in, I left them in. But this can be anonymous. If this is your image, feel free to speak up, but don't feel like you have to. But the idea is that we'll take a look at all the images, we'll pull them up, and as a group, we'll offer our opinions. What do we like? What do we think could be improved? Do we think it would look better if we tried this crop or if this adjustment? So we'll do that and again, this is all collaborative. It's all friendly. It's all to provide good constructive feedback in a non-competitive, no pressure environment. So this is just learning exercise, really. That's what it's all about. Any questions before I get started? All right, hearing none, we'll jump into it. So I don't know what most people use, but I'm going to be using Lightroom for this. I've pulled all the images down from the website and I've loaded them into Lightroom. Like I said, I've stripped all the file names, so we won't see those, but we'll go ahead and get started. So here is our first image. And let me do this. Be a little bit larger. So tulip fields. Who wants to go first with some thoughts on this one?
How do I look at the accepted image?
How do you look at what?
Accept. I mean, how can I see the photo?
Yeah, you're not sharing anything.
Can't see it, John.
Oh, I'm not sharing anything. That would be a very important part. I thought, hang on. Oh, there it is. Share screen. Share this. No, share this. And here. Now, can you confirm you can see it?
Oh,
yep.
okay.
I bet those tulips look a lot better now, don't they? All right. Now who's got some ideas on what they think about it?
This is Audrey. I like the diagonals. I like the color, it pops. I don't think that the sky or the trees add anything, and I probably would have cropped them out.
I agree with that.
So I was looking at this one earlier myself. I think you've got something there. So Audrey, were you thinking about something like that to start with?
Yes.
Yeah. And then what about this corner down here at the bottom?
I think we could probably move that too.
We were to do something like that.
Yeah.
See, I think that it takes away a little bit of the context.
Okay.
I would clone it if you know how to like clone a little bit, or make it green so it won't distract too much, because the dirt kind of distracting.
Yep. So using Lightroom tools only for this, which are not ideal, I would prefer to do this in Photoshop.
Yeah.
But we could do something like that.
Yeah, like that.
Hang on a second. I want to do clone, not heal. But yeah, this, like I said, this is not perfect, but this is just to give an idea of the concept. I think that would, cloning would be a better solution for getting rid of that corner. Any other ideas?
A nice image.
Okay. With that, let's go to the next one.
So should we,
I was gonna say,
But-
thanks. I went back and forth with that image and I agree with cloning out the sky and the trees in the background. I have multiple versions of this photo. I have to admit, I'm not a big, although I use Lightroom every day, I'm not a big fan of Lightroom's cloning feature because to me, I always end up creating artifacts using Lightroom's. But I like you all suggestions, so thank you.
Yeah, I agree. Lightroom is pretty good, I think, for spot healing. But when you get into cloning, when you get to, trying to fix larger problems like what I was looking at here in the corner, you're absolutely right. Photoshop and other tools are much better at fixing those.
This
not
is
bad what
much-
you just did
this is
there,
a much
John.
stronger composition.
We can't tell.
Yeah, I mean, if you didn't see me do it, unless you were looking at like spots like right there, it starts to show up pretty quick and easy. But Daryl, I got to tell you, I love the color of these tulips on the foreground. That was a wise choice to put those up front because those really pop.
Yeah, thank you.
Where do you take this shot?
This was at Burnside Farms in
Burnside.
Nooksville.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's.
So they do a beautiful tulip display every year.
Yeah, and they usually do sunflowers too, don't they?
Yeah, July timeframe. So that's the next thing I look forward to.
Yeah. Yeah, Burnside Farms. They've got a webpage and Facebook group. So check them out. Let's go to the next one. Great macro of a flower, possibly even a sunflower.
It does look like a sunflower or maybe a daisy. I like the monochrome look to it rather than just a typical black and white. Nice color choice.
More of a sepia tone, yeah.
Mhm.
Nice contrast with the deep black background as well.
Yep. Definitely separates the flower and it doesn't let you go anywhere else except the flower.
Anyone see noises? Or just me?
Well, so let's take a zoom in. This is at 100%. So it's your pixel peeping here, folks. So there is a little bit of noise. Now, I'll admit, with the sepia tone, application here, the noise kind of works for me. And the reason is that when I see a sepia tone, I'm thinking like a really old school black and white, and they usually have some grain. So from that perspective, this grain doesn't really bother me. Well, but what I did notice was, I'll zoom into this section here. So what we've got is a very shallow, I mean, it's a macro. So and with macro comes very shallow depth of field. And we've got a really sharp edge on this petal down here in this corner. And then it quickly fades off. So you got this petal in the front that quickly goes out of focus. And you can see on this petal, you've got this part right here diagonally through that petal is in sharp, then soft on the left and soft on the right. That comes with the territory of macro. I struggle with it myself. So that's why I noticed this, is because I struggle with this.
Hey,
All the
John,
stacking.
I do believe that the beautiful picture. However, I think that that have been cropped and zoomed, so you see a lot of noises, and they're not really the truly shape and sharp of the flower itself. I think they're missing something. I don't know what it is, but it doesn't seem like it's from original scale, but that's been scaled up before, right? I don't know, or after.
Could have been. I mean, here again, you got another area where part of the petal is sharp. And I thought of that too when I was first looking at this. When I thought it might have been some processing artifacts that, could have come from, pushing and pulling the various tones of the photo. It's possible. Again, I don't know if the photographer's on and wants to bring it up. But frankly, I'm with Nikki. I like the composition on this. I think the monochrome sepia tone treatment was great. I'm a sucker for good abstract, especially macro abstracts. So this one, I thought was lit very well. So all of those aspects were really good.
So
This
this is
a nice shape.
Yeah, this is my photo again, and I think I can't recall. I think this is I may have used a Velvet 58 lens baby on this, and if anybody's ever used the lens baby Velvet 58, and that was I think the first time I had used it. I was using the peaking, and so trying to figure out the focus area. So as you pointed out, John, it's very easy to go from very sharp to very shallow and blurry. The other thing, John, you mentioned, which is, and I like monochrome, is where's the line between grain and noise? And I just, that's always a struggle for me.
This to me, if this is grain, this to me doesn't scream noise. This could have easily been added in as part of an effect in Photoshop. And I don't know. I mean, over here, I don't know if it's coming through on the Zoom, but over here in the dark, you do see some of that grain over there, which, okay, somebody may interpret that as noise. But again, given the treatment that you provided here, if this were pure black and white, like gray tones and stuff, okay, that might have pushed it more into the noise interpretation. My opinion, what call it noise, call it grain. To me, that's not distracting in this image at all.
So I have a quick question from a critique and competition perspective, and you all have had judges over the years and months. So you mentioned pixel peaking, peaking, yes. So when I work on photographs, I always think about where is the viewer going to be viewing this from a particular distance, and so how many people actually get up so let me just cut to the chase. Do the judges do they spend a lot of time zooming in at 100%? I know one of the judges we had since I've been part of the club really did look at every photo at 100%, but is that kind of a key element of judging?
My response is going to be, it depends on the judge. It does. Some judges go more for the visual impact, the emotional appeal of an image, much more so than zooming in and seeing, okay, did they catch every possible sensor dust spot in this image? Others get to be very technical, and they're looking for, let me zoom into this thing and see, is this landscape sharp front to back? It really depends on the the preferences of a given judge.
Okay, thank you.
I could not figure out whether this was a goat or some other farm animal or some young wildlife. I just could not figure it out.
A
John,
piebald
that's a
deer.
piebald deer.
Okay.
Oh, a what?
Piebald deer.
Eyeball deer.
It's
Yeah,
about
piebald.
Piebald.
2% of the deer population. It's not an albino, but it's close.
Got it. So
And
basically,
it's
it's
mascot.
okay. So it's
Wildlife.
got it's almost like a melanin pigmentation, but only goes up to the fur and
Correct.
differences. Okay.
I put this in because this was taken midday. It came out, I shot it, and you can very see that the white blew out.
Oh yeah.
And I'm not exactly sure. And it really upset me because this is the first time I've seen it. It's not, they're not very common. And although it's in focus, I didn't get the highlights. So I was beating my head against the wall. So I guess the question is, what what would have been the right fix for this? Should I have used a polarizer? Should I have sensation? I wasn't sure what to do.
Yeah, and I noticed that myself, and so I can definitely appreciate your frustration and what we're looking at here for everybody who's following along at home. And if you pay attention, I don't know if it's going to come across real easy, but look underneath my histogram up here as I move the cursor over the image, and it's not doing it. Maybe I need to go to develop. Yeah, I need to go to develop. So pay attention, underneath the histogram up here on the top right. As I move my cursor over, you're going to see values for R, G, and B, red, green, and blue. That is a percent. Basically what it's looking for is it's going to give you an indication of a percentage, really from 0 to 255, between all those 3 channel values. And here you can see that they're all the same value. There are 77, or almost 78 across the board, because it looks like the exposure was pulled down. Is really what it looks like. And Audrey, your question is very well taken. It's like, okay, I'm going to be shooting a subject that has very bright whites or very bright highlights. Like in this case, I've got white fur, midday sun. It's going to blow out, but my camera is metering. The default is to meter the entire image, so that the average luminance value across the image is basically 18% gray. That's what the camera's default mode is. How do you fix it? Well, anybody who's shot white birds in midday, they know there's a trick that many cameras, most of them have, which is you can use what's called spot metering. And like Canon, for example, I don't know about the newer Canons, but the older Canons, right there in the middle of the viewfinder, you could say put it in spot metering mode, and it would basically draw a small circle around the middle of that viewfinder, and it would take a metering only off of that small part. In Nikon, it actually follows the where you put the focus point. So Nikon is superior in that regard, but anyway, so with Canon you can do a compose, and you can put it in the aperture lock, basically to lock in that exposure, and then recompose your shot to put the subject where you want and take the picture. And what it would do, and again with Nikon, you can just put the focus point on that white area and lock in your exposure there. And what it will tell the camera is to expose for those brightest parts of this image. So in this case, just as an example, if you had it in spot focus mode and had focused on this area right beside the eye, it would have exposed for that whitest, brightest part of the fur and kept that exposure there. So that's how you prevent it from overexposing a bright subject in bright light. There is a catch. There's always a catch. When you do this, you run the risk of completely underexposing all your background. Possibly. In a bright day like this, probably not much of a risk. And then when you bring it into Lightroom or Capture One or your favorite raw editor, it's a quick and easy adjustment. You've got the highlights already protected, and you can adjust your exposure, and everything else is going to look great with little risk of noise. Now, that's why I'm mentioning this, is because sometimes, and this is the catch, sometimes when you're using a spot metering trick that I was talking about, if the rest of the scene is not bright midday sun, for example, it's possible that this will become almost black in the background. For example, a good example for this might be where you're taking a picture of an actor on a stage in a theater production, and you want some of that set to be visible in your image, but you've got this bright spotlight on the actor, and you want to keep the actor well exposed. Well, you put it in spot metering mode, you can expose on the actor, and everything on the set runs the risk of just being blacked out. So that's an example of what I'm talking about. It depends on the setting. Just be careful when you're using it. But spot metering is a very good way of protecting those highlights on these types of subjects. Anybody else have any input?
Thanks, John. I knew there was like one setting I had wrong. I was so mad when I got home.
Don't be. The most important thing is you have the image. Okay, fine. It's not technically accurate, but you've got this image of this rare sighting of a piebald deer. Don't cry about it. I've never seen this,
Yeah.
much less got a photo.
I have something to add on top of John's feedback, which is great. I mean, it's right. Using the spot meter will help a little bit, but so instead of point on the white parts, I would try to find like the mid ground, between the darkest and the whitest, and then just point in the middle. So it's kind of, you can, the white one won't be too much exposed, and the dark won't be too much dark. So
That's another good tip, and I use that one frequently. And usually, especially in noonday sun, usually I'll expose on a green area, especially a bright green area that's in the direct sun, and that will usually give me a good, and I like Pat's idea, a good balance between protecting the highlights and protecting those shadows as well.
So John and Pat, would you recommend then to go full manual and stay away from like Aperture Priority or any of them? So your shutter speed or what have you doesn't change automatically as your animal subject, in this case, moves. So your settings would move as you're trying to take pictures.
So I'll give my answer. I encourage Pat and anybody else to give their answer too. This is a great discussion topic. I don't know if my D850 has ever seen an automatic photo mode. I'm sure I've used it at some point, but I'm almost always in manual mode. I learned on film. I didn't have automatic modes. So it just came natural to me when I moved into the digital world to go with the manual. I have played with automatic modes on various cameras, but like I said, it's so rare that I go in auto modes that I don't even think of it, quite frankly. Now, I will say I don't do a whole lot of wildlife shooting. Actually, I do remember when I put it in auto mode one time, it was auto ISO mode, is where I put it auto ISO mode when I was shooting some air shows, basically. I wanted a proper exposure on the airplanes, a dark airplane on a bright background, for example. Let the ISO go where it goes. I want a defined shutter speed, and I knew what my aperture was going to be. So let the ISO float, for example. But anyway, that's me. I prefer manual for almost everything I shoot. Pat, Audrey, anybody got an opinion?
I think one other thing you could probably do is, if you're chronically exposing images like this, see if you dial down the exposure compensation. That way you underexpose it a little bit, and then you can restore the shadows.
Actually, that's a good way to tell the auto exposure when you're leaving it on like a full frame exposure mode, for example. Nathaniel's idea works fantastic. You just tell the automatic system how to balance their exposure to fit your needs.
Maybe another try with Aperture Priority.
The aperture priority, where you set the aperture and your depth of field, and let the camera worry about the shutter speed and ISO.
Right.
Okay.
Yep, I should shoot manual, but when you shoot wildlife or something's moving, you have to give the shutter speed concern, right? Because if it's moved, it will get blurred. So I would set shutter speed kind of high, or even do aperture mode, like the person that just mentioned. Yeah.
Nathaniel?
Yeah, Nathaniel.
No. Was it Nathaniel? Yeah, I think it was Nathaniel talking about aperture priority.
Yeah. So, yeah, it depends on, like, if
Or the-
wildlife is something we move very fast, so you want to get really still action. So
Yeah, Pat. So especially when you're shooting birds, I assume that when you're talking about birds in particular, you're wanting a shutter speed up there like 1,500, 1,000 to really stop it. And in which case, frequently, especially if you're doing like morning or dusk hours, when the animals are alive and feeding, that ISO can go really high.
Yeah.
All right.
So
let's move on. Wedding image.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah, really love
That's here in the Great Falls. Local, nice.
Yeah, I strongly suspect this is Fisherman's Eddy at Great Falls.
How did that woman walk out there with
Aha.
that dress?
That's because if it
Sure she's
my
barefoot, but her sneakers, I guess.
well, actually, if it is Fisherman's Eddy to get out to, if it is indeed Fisherman's Eddy, were I the photographer helping them get down, I would have encouraged them to put the good clothes and dress in a backpack and go down in clothes that you don't mind getting scuffed and muddy.
There's not exactly a changing room down there, though, John.
No, but you could bring a little pop-up tent, like
There
they
you
use on
go.
model shoots.
There you go.
Because again, if I were a professional photographer, I'm sure I would have one of those. But yeah, I had the same thought, Nikki. It's like, how in the world? Forget him. How did she get down that hill in that dress?
You're right. She probably changed into it, and everyone just shielded her as she changed.
Yeah, it could have been that, or she could have worn a bikini down there. But anyway, anybody want to kick us off on evaluating this one?
I think it's lovely. They're very much in focus, which is the point of it. You kept the falls, a nice focus, soft focus, I meant to say. Unfortunately, you can't always have everything. So, unfortunately, you do have a bald sky. So I probably would have cropped down to get rid of a lot of that white sky. But other than that, I think it's a great image. We processed it nicely. Their skin tones look pretty good, and the flowers look great.
Okay. Anybody else?
I think he said everything I was going to say.
It is a great image. The only thing that's maybe a little bit off for me is the bottom. The bottom right rocks are in focus. The bottom left rocks are not in focus. I probably would do a linear mask or, and soften the rock underneath to make it all look soft, or crop out some of the rock, because it looks weird to have the rock in focus on the diagonal. Do you see that, John?
I do, and I tend to agree with you. So basically, position where the lens is, it does give this is one of those things. I'm not sure if it was intentional or specifically putting the rock in that area. But the point is as photographers, we always keep hearing, "Where's your foreground interest?" Okay, maybe that was what was intended here. But Audrey, I think you hit it right on the nail. And with this being out of focus as much as it is, it really is more of a shock. It does give you a little bit of I know how it's going to sound, but more, a little bit of a voyeuristic view. I'm back and I'm observing something from, and I've got stuff between me and the beautiful subject. So if you were standing there, you'd probably have, that's Great Falls. You're going to have a rock between you and the subject. But I agree with Nikki and Audrey on this. So I had actually played with an idea earlier. Bear with me a moment. So what I'm going to do is, because I think, frankly, because again, Nikki and Audrey, I think you both hit it. In terms of the processing, the tones, I don't have anything to say about it. It's good. but I do agree. There's just a lot of stuff that really I don't mind. I don't really care about. So if we were to bring the bottom, and I put it in 8x10 crop mode, because everybody's going to want a picture of this and print it out as 8x10. It's a very common ratio. Let's do something like this. And I wanted to highlight a little bit more of the waterfall than the cliff to the left. So I'm going to put this in case you're not tracking. I actually prefer the Fibonacci grid versus the rule of third grid. Something like that, to me, makes it a stronger image. I mean, it brings the subject clearly, and fills the frame. You still get the sense about the waterfall where you are. They're obviously standing on a rock, and to me, that, like Nikki and Audrey were saying, would solve a lot of the visual elements that I saw as well.
Yeah,
I like that.
Thoughts?
that looks great.
So John, let me ask you,
To answer the question, she hiked down in shorts and then she just put it over the shorts.
Thank you for letting us know.
Good for her, because that's a hell of a hike down there. So I also noticed, since you spoke up, you were using your favorite 105 1.4 on this.
And I think I should have stopped the
I knew
aperture
it.
down a little bit, but
Yeah,
too much of a treat.
because Audrey hit it. This rock down here underneath them, that is where your plane of focus is. And then when I come up, by the time I get to his hands and the flowers, it is softer. Now, for me to notice this, I had to pixel peep. I had to come in at 100%. So that's the only reason I really noticed that it was soft. And I only did that when just looking through it.
Yeah,
But
that's the only thing that I've come to the conclusion is I probably should have stopped it down a half a stop or something like that. But
yeah, I was trying to figure that out. If I was trying to give some thought to, okay, what would, if I were to recommend a different aperture, what would it have been? I don't know, maybe as much as 5.6, maybe somewhere around probably a 4 would probably, because I imagine, given that this is a 105, you were back far enough where an f4 would probably have brought the couple into focus. Or
I've got a bunch of others that were shot with a 70 to 200, and this is the favorite of the bunch that I've got. But I didn't even notice the rocks were in focus until you guys pointed that out, and that's the plane of focus. So
again, beautiful image, fantastic idea to get them down there. And you found the right rock. I think I know what rock you had them standing on. Good pose, great shot. I don't know, Nikki, what do you think? Is it even worth the sky replacement?
No,
I
the
didn't think
focus
that
is
couple wouldn't
clearly
mind.
on the couple, and yeah.
Say again, Pat.
I don't think the couple wouldn't mind if skies are gray or the rock is too the rock is sharper. Yeah, they captured them really well.
Precisely. And that's another point that I forgot to make earlier when I was thinking about this. If this were printed, and I think it was Daryl was talking about viewing distance, what's going to be the typical viewing distance? And is the typical viewer in their home looking at this on the wall going to get so close that they're going to see that very minor difference in focal plane? Probably not.
No.
They're going to see a beautiful couple in a beautiful location, enjoying hopefully the most enjoyable day of their life. So well done. Well done. Any other thoughts?
yeah, I just reiterate, well done. I steer away from portraits because I don't do them very well. So anytime you can capture people and the skin tone and the dress and the pants, and then you have the background much lighter, and I'm looking at it going, I'd be hard pressed to do the same thing. So
All right, let's move on. So I don't know. I think the photographer is going to be viewing this one on video. I don't think he joined, but This is part of a pair. So let's take a look at this one.
Well, first
What
of
do
all,
we
I would
think?
make it panorama. That would be really good. Just bring the top down like halfway.
Okay.
Just focus on the bottom dune sharp.
Are you talking about like down here?
Yeah, like that.
Okay. See how that looks.
That is awesome.
Yeah, you're just catching the curves of the lower portion, which is beautiful. And then whatever those footsteps are, tall animal or whatever that is, walking out leads you right there.
Those are you may have seen them in a couple of different movies from time to time, when you documentaries. Those are Banta tracks.
What is that?
Somebody
Star
got it. It's a Star Wars
Thanks,
reference.
Nikki.
No,
I
Star
didn't know
Wars
either.
Yeah, I'm not.
Oh, Star Wars reference.
yeah, exactly. No, these I think this was taken at Great Sand Dunes National Park. I think, and these were definitely people, having walked up
Yeah.
on the dunes.
Okay.
I think that crops, I guess what Pat suggested, works for me because I was torn between the people up at the top, the person in the middle, and the person at the bottom. And so there's like two stories going on there.
Yep.
So I think the panoramic crop that was suggested, I mean, actually, you could probably crop it in multiple ways and have multiple stories in there.
You are correct.
And but yeah, but I think the panoramic crop that you had there initially, because you get the leading lines.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I probably would have turned up the shadows a little bit more on the backside of the dune, but other than that, I mean, and maybe turn down the highlights just a bit, but
Yeah, this is Audrey. That on the top part of the picture, I would turn the luminescence down a little bit, or turn on the top part, because it looks, yeah, I probably would either turn down the luminescence or turn down the highlights a bit, because you don't want to lose the detail.
Okay. So I mentioned this was part of a pair. So let's go look at the other version. You can tell the first one was a crop of this one. Now that we've got the full image, how does your opinion change? Who was it that said there are multiple scenes in here?
that was better.
I think you're absolutely correct. When you see the full image here, I mean, you could pick out 3, 4, maybe even half a dozen different. Ooh, that's the shot. That sort of thing. So, what do we think?
I think the instincts were correct. Well, I say multiple shots, but I think the crop picked the first time. So if you hadn't shown me the second one, I would have thought great image. And as again, there's multiple things to do here. But from my perspective, I think the crop that they chose and then the addition of the panorama made for a pretty strong image.
So I'm using a 3-to-1 landscape crop here. I think Pat's idea, I think he was the first one to mention it. This wide panoramic format, I think, works well in this situation, mainly because it is, who was that? Was it Nikki that was talking about the leading line here? So, I mean, there are multiple ways to crop this, and I was playing with this earlier myself, and, there's a crop very similar to what we were looking at earlier. I was also looking at another one here, and this one, I think I went like an 8x10 and was focused on, so I don't know how many of you have been to Great Sand Dunes National Park, but let me just, and stop it. I keep doing the wrong thing here. I know. Let me do this. Done. Okay. So we're at the original here. This behind them really is a hill of sand. So this isn't a case where the camera is way up above them. I mean, the camera may have been on a dune a little bit elevated, particularly higher than these, but these dunes are 600, 700 feet high. So that could be a story in and of itself. So I was thinking, again, just playing around with different crops. Because, I knew this crowd, and this crowd would be so short on opinions, as you can tell. But I was thinking, even a crop like this could help tell the story of the magnitude of these dunes. Now, I will admit, it's not as interesting as that leading line, but it's what story you're trying to tell.
Well, and this could be even more interesting in this crop that you chose, John, if you just playing with the shadows and the highlights to pull out the texture in the upper part of the image, to give it more depth in terms of the elevation.
Yep, just adding a little bit of contrast here, for example.
Yeah.
So, and again, what I'm illustrating here, and I hope it's coming across on the video, is this original image, I think, is a great example of being able to find multiple stories to tell within the original capture. Going back to Pat's original idea, my instinct, very much similar. I think the original idea that the artist put forward was on the right track. I think a more panoramic crop, and again, I'm just using 3:1 as an example to illustrate it. I think that helps bring out a real interesting perspective on this scene.
Also, John, can you see in monochrome or black and white and see how's that?
Let's take a look.
The big
Now,
one,
here
the whole picture.
Oh, you want to see the whole thing?
Yeah.
Because we all know who likes the black and whites around here, right, Pat? Here, let me reset all my adjustments that I've done.
That's nice. Got different mood.
Definitely.
I think I have to play with it because I don't see the depth of contrast in this. I think you'd have to play with the sliders a lot to give it the pop. Yeah.
Yeah. So what I'm doing is I'm bringing in a little bit of contrast. We could darken down the shadows a bit as well. But yeah, Audrey, I think you're on the right track. I mean, we will want to bring out some of the textures, especially in the monochrome, and that's the thing. But and here I am preaching to Pat about monochrome, but it's all about the textures,
Yeah.
Right, Pat?
True.
All right. Any other thoughts?
It's like snow.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? Yeah, they could be exactly. They could be snowshoeing out there. Here we go. Another macro shot.
What is it?
Black and white.
Like a mouse.
I think you're onto something there, Pat.
It's like a Logitech mouse.
Yes, that is a vertical mouse. It is not Logitech, but
I will admit I tried one of these. When I back when I was dealing with the carpal tunnel situation, just couldn't get the hang of it. Went with trackball instead.
yeah, I can't do a trackball. So
Oh, there we go. Any thoughts? Anybody?
The first thing I noticed, it's the white spot there. It's really bright. So
Which
on
one?
the left,
Which
the left, yeah.
right here?
Yeah.
I think that's where the focus ended up, focus point ended up going. I wish I like the idea of it. So I like the shape and definitely the monochrome. wish the focus was either more on top, showing the curve, the whole curve of the actual mouse from, top to the bottom, or else get the focus on the very front side. But as I see it, I mean, I don't have the best eyes, but it definitely seems like the focus fell more in the back versus the front.
Yeah, I'm zooming in at 100% now, and the scroll wheel is definitely sharper than the front of the mouse. And it looks like right here is where the plane of focus is. I don't know if that's button 4 or 5, but I'm sure Sarah could tell me which button number that is.
And maybe this was shot with a macro, so just needed to up your f-stop in order to get more in focus.
Yeah, stop down the aperture will widen that depth of field for sure. Another technique is focus stacking. I think somebody mentioned that on an earlier image talking about the flower. Focus stacking is certainly common, very common in the macro world because of that narrow depth of field.
Yeah.
Yep.
Let me have a question. On the macro photo, what do you think? You should have the total photos, I mean, the image in focus or partially in focus?
I'm not sure I'm tracking what you're saying there.
Okay. While taking a macro photo, do you want to have the total image in the focus or partially in the focus? To me, it seemed like, if we only focus in a part of the image, you may defeat the intention of the macro, especially in this image. Don't you think?
So your question is exactly the question that the photographer would need to answer. What do they want in focus? And you're absolutely right. With macro, the intent of macro could be to take advantage of that extremely narrow depth of field to bring the viewer's attention to this particular aspect of the subject and nothing else. And if that's your intention, absolutely take advantage of that very narrow depth of field. In other cases, for example, entomologists. Yeah, I'm going to let you look that one up. But entomologists taking photos of their favorite subjects might want the entire, say, dragonfly head in perfect focus, very, very sharp. But they're at such a close distance on the focus that they may have to take 30 or 40 shots to get the entire dragonfly's head in focus. And those are very small things. So again, it's really what is the story? What does the photographer really want in focus? So there's no right answer. I mean, there's no one answer that applies to everything.
Thank you.
That's my opinion. This is a pure critique. Don't.
I do think that it depends on, like you said, depend on the subject. It depends on the intention as well.
So from a processing perspective, I'm going to say that yes, while there are bright spots, like probably like a metallic finish on the scroll wheel, another metallic trim area here, the highlights seem to be very well protected. I didn't see anything that was really blown out, like truly blown out with zero recoverable detail. It appears that this is positioned on a piece of felt. I say that because I've got some of that material myself, and that's what it looks like. And so I was left asking the question, okay, what was I intended to look at? And I couldn't figure that out. So then, I was like, okay, was this, an abstract? Maybe. And I think a version of this subject probably was submitted in the abstract competition. And I thought that was a very well done abstract, by the way. So I'm left going, okay, I'm not sure what I was supposed to look at. It's an interesting photo, very well handled in terms of exposure and treatment. On a technical level, again, we talked about, okay, where some, just in case somebody hasn't learned this already, the human eye is drawn to areas of highest contrast and sharpness, basically, bright areas and highest contrast. And here there's nothing like overly bright. Obviously, like Pat mentioned, you got these bright highlights that pull you in immediately. Is that where the sharpest focus is? Well, certainly the scroll wheel appears to be one of the sharpest areas on it. So beyond that, if I'm looking at technical aspects, these bright spots that you see periodically, it's dust. It's an piece of office equipment. It's going to have dust. And when you get into the macro world, definitely you're going to have dust. So that's where, when I have used, for example, I frequently will shoot subjects on a piece of acrylic, a sheet of black acrylic. And despite my best efforts, there is always dust on it. And I end up spending a significant amount of time just coming through a spot healing brush, get it really, really small, just going around, just attacking all of those dust spots. Now, pick your favorite tool. You like to do spot removal in Lightroom? Do you prefer to do it in Photoshop? You know what? I could flip a coin frequently. Photoshop's healing tools are generally superior to Lightroom, but quick and dirty Lightroom might do it. Anyway, that was, from a technical perspective, that was my only real critique. It was just some of those spots were distracting me, but that's because I'm a technical photographer. Any other comments? Okay, move on. Who's going to kick us off on this one?
So cool. We got lots of rests and run. Love the sunlight coming through the window. You can see that coming through on the air there across the brick and whatever metal is up above. Pretty cool. It's possibly a little lopsided, but that's an easy fix. The building could be lopsided because it looks very old and abandoned.
Is it though? I had a similar question. So I took the left edge here and brought it in to say, okay.
Yeah, it looks pretty, that column looks pretty straight.
Exactly. And then of course,
open.
So then that's where I ended up with, maybe that floor is sloping down slightly to the outside. I don't know.
Yeah, you're right.
The bigger question I had, this is the part that I can't quite figure out for sure. Was a monochrome treatment applied, or was this full color? Figure that one out. I think it's full color, but it sure looks monochrome, doesn't it?
If I recall correctly what I did on this, do you want me to tell you?
I was going to let you sit there and be quiet, let the rest of us dream up stuff about it, but go ahead.
If I recall correctly, I'm pretty sure that this is essentially full color. I don't remember doing any kind of monochrome treatment on this.
Yeah, because this looks like a some kind of industrial setting, urban decay type setting, and I could just see this looking exactly like that, with no desaturation needed, for example. Anybody else? So when I was looking at this one, since no one else is going to speak up, I'll fill the time a little bit. This one to me would be one that I would really enjoy just playing with different kinds of post-processing techniques. For me, I think Nikki hit on what I would find most interesting, which is finding a way to play with that light coming in from the window and the doors and, coming across. So, would putting a strong vignette on the the top left and bottom right corners, and maybe a little bit of dodging to highlight those corpuscular rays coming in through the window. Maybe.
And grunge it up more. I think this one, you could go crazy with the clarity and texture.
Oh boy. You just said the words because I know what Pat's thinking. What's
He
it going to
wants
look like?
grungy. He wants it contrasty.
Yeah,
He's
buddy.
stepped away. He's not here
Oh,
to tell us
what?
what to do.
Yeah, because he'd tell me exactly what turn up the texture, really make it crunchy. I mean, I'm not saying this is better than the original. I'm just saying this is just an example of what kinds of processing, playing, playfulness that you could have with this image. I mean, this is just it's a fantastic image to just go to town on different processing techniques. And I gotta ask, was the floor sloping to the outside wall?
Yes, I'm being told yes.
Okay.
I don't remember that detail, but
May I say that I really love the colors of the picture photo because of, the rusty colors and the stays of the the industrial site. That's really perfect to me because it shows you the age and shows the intention of the intensity of the the time had passing through it.
Yeah, and just desaturating it just a little, you can play with, again, it's just a different mood, different feeling. I mean, again, it's a very, very well captured scene to just play with processing techniques. Anybody else? All right, let's move on. No, stop that.
thank you all for the critique.
Quite welcome.
Oh, well, I love flowers.
Well, Allie, tell us what you think about it then. Kick us off.
I think that someone like me would love to walk in the rain and take a picture of flower like this, and it's just wonderful colors and the background. I think the focus is really essentially bring up the intensity of the weather and the flowers. So it's really great picture photo.
I think I'm going to go out on a limb here. I think this is a type of image that only a Fujifilm camera could capture correctly.
Of course, you're right. Well, I will admit I ran it through Topaz Sharpening because it wasn't quite really in focus as much as I would have liked. And I'm sure it's pretty good considering it was raining. And but the petals there, like on the top, but it was still a little soft. They were even softer. So the Topaz Sharpening really helped greatly. I think I shot this around 5.6, so maybe I could have gone a little higher. I'm not sure. I didn't want too much of the background to start coming in because bluebells are beautiful, but wide shots aren't nice of them. So I didn't want too much coming into focus.
Well,
but it was fun being out in the rain.
Yeah, and so
Oh, 6'4".
okay, is there any value in cropping? Maybe, but
And
the more
then
you
I was
crop,
seeing the corners. I'm like, oh, I should have gotten rid of those lower corners. So yeah.
well, maybe to me, I didn't find them very distracting at all, quite frankly.
I put a
I mean,
vignette on it, which helped to at least make them kind of vanish a little bit.
yeah, and to your point, I was thinking, okay, would filling the frame more with the subject help? And you know, okay, there's the original ratio. If we were to take it to say an 8:10 ratio, build it better. If we go vertical, yeah. So
John,
I don't know if I'd improve it. Go ahead, Audrey.
Right. I think
John,
if you,
try a square. This is one of the pictures where square crop really will help. I'm trying to channel Lori Langford, who does a lot of our stuff. I think she'd say for this where to really,
Yeah, that's nice.
yeah.
So the problem with that though is we lose all of the falling rain, and that I thought added a lot of interest to this image.
and John, I agree with you wholeheartedly, because that's what I was going to say. I mean, I think
Hey, John,
one of the beauties of this
may
image
you
is
try the spiral,
the rain.
golden spiral roll to see what happens?
Yeah, Howie, I'll give that a shot. Daryl, what was finish your thought?
No, I was just concurring with you, because I think part of the beauty of the shot is to see the rain streaks. So I think if you crop it too much, you lose the motion. So you got a very sharp image, and I appreciate the fact that Nikki used Topaz, because as a tool, she's got a beautifully sharp image, and she's got this beautifully out of focus rain, but we can see it's raining. And the motion, I think you lose some of the motion and emotion if you take out too much of the rain.
Yeah, and Daryl, when I was looking at this earlier, that's what led me to leave it at the original crop, and because I played with this, you know, as Howie, you know, as you can see, I was using. I'm sure everybody knows how to pull these up, right? When you're in crop mode, everybody uses different crop guides, right? But if you press O, for those who don't know, you get all the different overlays. You just keep pressing O, and then once you get to like the golden spiral, for example, that Howie was mentioning, if you hold the shift key and press O, it gives you the various versions of the golden spiral.
That's cool. I'm learning something. I like it.
Yeah. So again, you know, would filling the frame more with the subject help? Maybe. That's my opinion. In terms of I've played with this a couple of times, and I keep coming back to the original crop that Nikki put into this. I think is really good, mainly only because the rain.
Maybe I just take it into Photoshop and do a little content aware and try to get rid of those corners, lower corners.
Actually, I think there are different ways of dealing with that. Again, I was not overly distracted by this corner at all. I might, and Nikki, I'm only doing this because I got to find some way of bringing you off of your pedestal. Maybe desaturating this group of flowers that's in the background, maybe. And again, I am trying to find ways to nitpick this image. This is an absolutely beautiful image. I love it. I think it has a lot of good emotional appeal. The rain seals the deal for me. I think that really drives this one home.
Nikki,
that's my opinion.
Like Fuji?
What's that?
Do you like the Fuji?
I do. I love it. I mean, I used to be Canon, but I was just a little Canon rebel, and I loved that camera. And but I was outgrowing it. But John mentioned carpal tunnel earlier for himself, while I was having some major issues earlier. So going full frame was out of the question for me with all the weight, because it was both of my hands I was having issues with. So it was going to be mirrorless all the way, and I love it. I'm still like, I'm a couple versions old, but I would love to upgrade, but yeah, it's just not in the cards right now. But yeah, I really like it. I like it a lot.
Thanks, Nikki.
I know a lot of people are going Sony, and even Olympus seems to be getting a lot of talk, you know, too right now. But yeah, I've been happy with it.
Is this the XT version of Fuji?
Yeah, I'm an XT2, and they're up to like 4 now. If you like video, then I think you definitely want like the 3 or the 4. I don't know. I don't recall exactly what all the difference is between the 3 and the 4. I don't think there was a huge difference, but I would love to go 3 because I think it has better autofocusing. And someday. Yeah,
Again,
overall, I've been happy with
great image. I love the emotional appeal on this one.
it. Thank you.
Ooh, speaking of emotion,
I go from a rainy day to a sunny day.
who's going to kick us off?
Best, nice atmosphere with the colors, nice warm colors. And is it just my monitor? Or is it there like some sort of texture on it? And maybe just the resolution.
It's not texture. At least it doesn't appear that there was a texture. It could be that there was some treatment applied, like a desaturation, maybe. But in terms of a texture overlay, it's not obvious to me.
I think it's just pixelization of the video.
Yeah, or
Okay.
pollen in the air.
Could
Like
be a whole
painting.
lot of pollen.
Well, I mean, you just get a little bounce off of some of that, and it adds to that effect.
Absolutely could, especially with a backlit scene like this.
I wonder if the kind of shaft of light, sort of, whether if that were emphasize some contrast, I guess, between the back, which still has some of that light, and the shaft of light, whether that would have any sort of dramatic positive effect. I don't know.
I'm curious whether some of that enhancement was already done. If this were all natural, oh man, did the photographer end up in the right spot at the right time?
It's not
even
all
if-
natural.
But you didn't have to speak up, did you? But yeah, Nikki, since you spoke up, I'm gonna give you props here. I think you did a great job with what Jack was talking about, which is using that light to pull that viewer nowhere else but that one tulip. And again, for the backlighting, I thought was a great idea on this one.
I
Who else
was
is-
shooting right into the sun, and I really actually kind of struggle with that. I wanted to include the sky, but I didn't really succeed there. Just I was blowing out the sky. And of course, I didn't think about pulling out my gradual neutral density filter, which I had with me, but I always forget the toys in the moment. But this was actually at Burnside Farms this past tulip season. This was not in the main field. Off to the side, there was some, I guess it was part of last year's fields, and these random growing tulips. And I eventually decided to go away from the completely organized and beautiful fields, and I went over to the deserted, forgotten, fields, and it was just really pretty over there, and there was just these, random tulips here and there, and so yeah, shooting into the sun definitely gave it the haze. I did add some beams of light from the top right over the tulip to make it look like it was shining even more, and that was just using the brush tool in Lightroom, and a little like lighter exposure I think I used. I just made some streaks just to kind of give it a little pop, and I might have added dehaze to make it look even hazier. I think I did.
So that's a very good point. So what we're talking about
I think it
here
was
is
already hazy, but I think I added a little bit more.
right. So folks may be familiar with the dehaze and moving it to the right to take haze out of the atmosphere. But we can move it to the left
Yeah.
and add mood.
You don't think about it, but yeah, I learned that little trick from somebody. I'm like, that's pretty cool.
That could have helped here. And, you know, and
Sometimes you
again,
want it.
this was me just trying to say, okay, is there any way that I could possibly improve on this perfection? And I don't know that I could, but I was playing around with, you know, different crops, like maybe a vertical, because I was looking down here. Would I have cloned out that one little leaf tip? Maybe.
And then
But
you got the
then-
flower on the left-hand margin that, okay.
Yeah, and you know, so it's like, okay, I couldn't find. I mean, would this be a more compelling image? I don't think so, because I'm losing too
No.
much of the environment, in my opinion.
Yeah, you
So-
don't have a shaft of light, it's all backlit
Yeah.
then.
Yeah, so you know, this is a case where I'm not sure that. And again, let me do this.
So
Not the
I'm-
original.
I'm glad
But-
we're having this conversation because, you know, I often have conversations with folks. And maybe it's an excuse for me because I consider myself a decent photographer, but not great. But you know, I tell you, you know, Ansel Adams was an excellent photographer. He was a fantastic darkroom person. So if you can take an image and then go in and brush in the light, and I often think, if he had the tools we have today, what could he do? And so you want to start with a great image, but if you can make it fantastic in the dark room, I say good on you. That's a nice shot.
Or the Lightroom.
Or the Lightroom, yes.
So you saw what I was doing with some of the clothing, you know,
Yeah,
just a
clean
couple
up.
of different things. Yeah, and you know, and I was thinking, okay, so this bright tulip in the background again is pulling my eye a little bit. I was wondering, and I didn't play with this before, but is this an opportunity to maybe desaturate that a little bit? You know, just highlight that, just pull that saturation down. Would that help? Yeah, I think it would.
Yeah.
Not a whole lot, but just a little. Again, I'm looking for I'm looking for these tenths of a point that might take this from compelling.
Well, I
What
am
would you put above
seeing
compelling?
the dead head tulip
Stunning.
straight ahead. I guess, you know, I should probably lower the brightness. No, I don't. Yeah.
Are you
right
talking about this one back
there. I
here?
probably should have lowered make that not so bright. But, I did try cropping more from the bottom, and then the three leaves just ended up looking odd as I tried to pull the bottom up. So I left them.
Yeah. So I'm just, like I said, Nikki, I'm nitpicking your images here because they're really good coming out of the gate.
I think I've been like really playing with the profiles lately, and I think I added like one of the artistic colored ones. And it did add like a hint of like magenta or purple to the image. I thought in the haze it looked really cool.
Yeah. And Jack highlighted what I think really makes this image, and that was your treatment of the light up here. So,
Highlighted, I get it.
oh, my heart bleeds.
Oh, pretty. Oh my gosh. That's really nice. You got quite a few of them in focus. That's great.
Okay, well, let's just test that theory, shall we? Wait for Lightroom to catch up.
Pixel peeping.
Yes, I am. All right. The photographer put the center plane pretty darn parallel to that branch. All right, what else can we trip up this photographer on? We got to find something here.
Well, or we could find things to
We could, Jack, but don't let's not.
celebrate and encourage, and you know,
We-
things that are remarkable, we remark on.
We could, but you know, this photographer might not need this swollen head. But yeah, I think I think the initial reaction that you heard when we brought this up really nailed it. It's like, wow, it's red. The human eye loves red, and there you are, smack filling the frame with red stuff. It's a really interesting subject, quite frankly. I mean, it looks like a bleeding heart. Jack, any other good stuff you want to comment on?
Well, I just noticed the, I was gonna say transition, the different reds as you move away from the camera. I mean, you know, you look, and I think it's also the level of light near to the camera. You know, you got some kind of pinky almost compared to the other ones. I don't know if I don't know if you messed with, you know, the front pair to, you know, bring the, yeah, shift them a little away from pink and a little more to a more of a crimson than a, you know, whatever you'd call the pink tones in there, whether that would do anything. I will say the very, you know, back right hand corner is pretty dark. I don't know whether lightening that, I know putting light into corners is sort of taboo in the, you know, dogma of photography, but in this case, you know, you don't, when something is very dark, it has a visual weight and can also kind of pull the eye, so to speak. I don't know if lightening that up a little would do
And there are ways
anything.
to, and there are other ways to deal with that. So in this particular case, trying to find a way to select just a background to apply, you know, different treatment to it might be tricky in here, but a way to deal with that, if one were inclined to try Jack's idea, would be to add a little bit of darkening in the other corners and then play with a brightening or a darkening vignette overall. So then it would not look as off balance, and it wouldn't, you could probably get away with finding a way to lighten this if you were so inclined without having to worry about really intricate selections.
Well, you could actually use the object selection tool in Photoshop.
Yes.
I don't know if there's, I'm assuming there's the same capability in Lightroom, and you know, circle the whole thing and it will pick, oh, well, you must be looking. And so then you've got a mask, and now you can go in and mess with the whole area and leave the flowers and the stem untouched.
Yeah, so, you know, like you can go in, and what I did is you know, for those who weren't keeping up, I went in and said, you know, give me a select subject mask. So that's what we have here. And you can see that it's highlighting. And then the challenge is that it's also picking up some of the background. So we would still need to come in and clean up the mask a little bit. It is possible. And Jack,
I was only thinking of the last like 3 flowers, really. They're
Yeah.
the ones that are in the, you know, with the darker background.
Yeah,
But a very minor comment, really not. I guess it's just the sort of darkness and saturation and the redness of the, you know, last 4 or 6 compared to the ones up front.
That's probably how they bloom. Like often flowers are like even bluebells, you know, they
Yeah, I mean,
start
there
out
is a
more
bluish, yeah,
pink,
lighter
they
bluish.
end up purplish blue. I don't know much about bleeding hearts, but maybe it's the same way. They're like a dark red and then they turn more slightly pinkish by the time they're fully bloomed.
Well, I think they get lighter as they bleed, right?
Yeah, yes, yeah, they lose their color. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for the comments, Ed. I
I
realized
figured you'd appreciate
afterwards.
that, John. That's sort of down your.
Yeah, go ahead, Tim.
I realized afterwards I left my signature mark in there. That was foolish of me, but I think what Nikki was saying is right. I went back and looked at the original image I had in Lightroom without any processing applied to it, and there is a darkening of the color as you go to the right. As I think Nikki was saying, as they bloom, they get lighter. I guess that makes sense. As they get bigger, they get lighter. And I had that dark in the corner is from just a vignette that I applied in Lightroom. It just,
yeah. So I think that, well, let me put it this way. I thought of that when I first looked at this. And I suspect that the vignette is actually exacerbating a darker background that's already here, is what I suspect.
It is darker in the upper above the stem
Yeah.
than it is below the stem. It is
Yeah.
definitely darker there in the original image.
Now, for me, the question is, how distracting is it? Okay, if you really want to nitpick, maybe I try to brighten it a little bit. I don't think it really is much of a distraction in this particular image because, again, the human eye is looking at these bright red heart flowers here. Now, again, if I'm the technical photographer, remember, I don't know if it's an artifact of the export, but I see a line that may just be my monitor. I don't know. I think it's my monitor. It's not in the image. It's not moving with the image. Okay, so screw that or ignore that. But see this?
Oh, he's gonna call out your one dust spot.
Uh-oh. Where is
That's-
Denise here?
that's good,
She would have,
Tim.
if she was here, she would have.
I missed one. What can I say?
I know. So are you familiar with so if we go into dust spot, are you familiar with the visualize spots feature? Not that. Doggone it. Give me my hand back.
No, but it looks like
Yeah,
I
I've
should
never heard
be.
of that one.
Yeah, it helps on images like this, particularly for me, when I have a very soft bokeh on an image, or when it's, for me, it's usually in a sky. Clicking this on really does help highlight likely dust spots. And this will usually make them visible even when you are not likely to see them with your naked eye.
So what's it doing with the flowers there? Is it saying they're a big dust spot or what?
No, basically this is just a way of it's a funky contrast treatment that applies just to highlight it. And you can apply different levels of strength to it. Let me get my screen back here.
Well, I was just wondering if it's highlight the spots, why the flowers are highlighted. Because
it's basically just a black and white contrast treatment.
Okay.
And you can change the strength level. So anyway, this is just it's a tool to help highlight the spots. And sometimes, it might highlight a spot on your subject like this one right here, the black one here. And then if we turn that feature off, you see it is part of the flower.
Sure. That
you may or may want to leave there. And again, here with the pollen spots, do you want to leave them? Do you want to take them out? I don't know. Looks kind of natural to me, but anyway, that's just a tool that could be useful for picking up center spots. But again, a great subject. That the red.
So you have to be in the spot adjustment or the healing brush to get that visualization.
Exactly. So when you go into healing brush mode and your tool, and if the toolbar doesn't show up down here at the bottom, press the T button. And then there's a checkbox for visualize spots.
Thank you.
I'm kind of jealous. I have never seen these myself, but these are beautiful flowers, beautiful image, and the red and green, on the color wheel, magenta and green. There's a reason. If you look over here on your color treatment, green and magenta, complementary opposites. So again, great contrast of colors here too.
I think
Somebody
they
else had a
just,
comment?
they just happened to be in the house we bought.
Oh,
We didn't
nice.
plant them.
That's great. Tim, I was gonna add, if you wanted to, as far as when you're adding a vignette and you have a darker corner such as your top right, which maybe doesn't need the vignette added. Sometimes what I'll do in the maskings, I'll use the, what's it called, the gradual linear, and maybe just do it in the 3 corners and
Okay.
avoid the top right and just darken your edges that way. And then that way you can darken and lighten, you know, if another corner doesn't need as much. You just, you know, kind of manually doing it. It takes a little longer. But that
And
way,
Nikki, I'm doing this real time just to help illustrate
yeah,
the technique, I think.
So you can
And then
selectively
just
vignette
exposure as
then
needed.
corner by corner.
Yeah, you could
Right.
do it with the linear.
And then angle it however you need it. If you want, you know, a little
Yeah.
bit more spread out to the right, then just adjust as needed.
Yeah, that's another great technique.
Okay, great, thank you.
Hmm.
Zoom, zoom. Great
Thoughts?
shot.
That's a pretty good moment he captured.
Mhm. Even got action in the tires spinning, you know, the wheels. That's fantastic. But you got the driver pretty good in focus. That's a good shot. You didn't freeze all the action, which I like.
He still must
Yeah.
have a really fast shutter speed because that
Yeah,
those wheels aren't blurred that much.
yeah, yeah.
Let's see, what are those colors? Chartreuse and I don't know, the purple and the green look pretty good together, I think.
Mhm.
I don't know if I've been doing a painting class, and so this sort of informs some of my looking at things, but if there's a tool where you can sort of accentuate the churning clouds of, I'm assuming that's smoke from burning rubber, whether that would sort of add to the appearance of motion in the photograph.
So there is such a tool if I'm following what you're saying. So I can come up here and pick a brush, for example, just to illustrate. And up here is probably where it's going to be most applicable. If we come up here, and this applies to clouds in the sky too. So anyway, just to illustrate, you can bump up the contrast. You play with the contrast here. You can see how that pulls out some of the detail. You could also do highlights and get some detail in there. And this is, as with everything, it's a balance
Well,
to be struck.
How about by the front wheel that I'm thinking, the front right, driver's side wheel, like that there would be, churning clouds coming off of this wildly spinning tire.
Oh, you mean like adding smoke to it?
Well, or adding or bringing out what's there. I suspect that there's some billowing going on based on the motion of the tire, the motion of the car, and then the motion of the smoke. So I didn't know if there was a way of kind of getting the texture and that.
But basically help bring out some of the action of the moment is what I hear he's driving at.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sure there's a way to do it. I'm not sure if Lightroom is the best tool to do it, but maybe in Photoshop, maybe using a texture brush or something like that would be a way to just add a hint of texture to the smoke here, maybe.
Yeah, I don't know.
Any other comments? How about a crop? don't know, I think that, or something like this, not necessarily exact
Eh,
crop, but
I hear a lot of comments about, oh, stuff on the edge of the image and et cetera. But I think that sort of little gap in the clouds helps compositionally with the overall image. If you put it back, if you back to the original, you've got these shapes and proportions and so forth. And well, yeah, if it were taller, yeah, I mean, okay, yeah. So now, I mean, if you're going to crop, I think I would leave the top for that reason and then maybe bring up the bottom. I guess making it narrower would sort of emphasize the linear, horizontal aspect of it, and maybe motion. I don't know.
this is a 16:9 crop. Does that make it a
I mean,
stronger image?
the grass itself, was there, but it wasn't like essential for the image.
Yeah, I mean, the car is obviously the star of the show here.
Definitely.
All right. Any other comments? All right. What do you think about this one?
That's quite the look.
Yes.
I like that.
What are you looking at?
Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, Lightroom's got to catch up and finish drawing it. There we go.
And good photo. Oh, look at that.
Oh, look, got a little
nugget of something.
cough
there.
drop.
Good focus on the eyes. Nice.
Yeah, I would say close up. I mean, I get the look definitely. From a distance, I think I would lighten the area around the eyes. Just when you zoomed in, then it seemed like it was better lit. I don't know if that, but anyway.
Well, and John, you just really cropped there, and whoever took the picture, might have been zoomed in as far as they could go with, the lens that they had. But if not, I definitely would have tried to zoom in more to get rid of the
Well, this one was
branches in the front.
this one was definitely at 200 mil, so that I suspect 70 to 200 on this one.
So they were all the way out.
Yeah. So, and that's where I was looking at. It was okay. This image, the original. There's a lot of extraneous stuff that we want the bird filling the frame.
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't know. That's sort of yeah. That's. But then framing it, the trees are its environment. I don't know. Yeah, I guess, I mean, it is really a bird shot, so never mind.
I do like how they, I do like how they have the framed in the middle of those two out of focus branches there. That was well done.
And probably inadvertent.
I don't know. It's perfectly centered, so I'm not sure if it's inadvertent or not.
Yeah, I've taken a few pictures of trees, birds in trees, and it's like, God, I wish I had a chainsaw or something, clear away a little for your subject. I mean,
and why is it that bird always knows exactly to put their head behind a twig?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Any other comments on this one?
Yeah, I think I love the original because that brought me. I love the wildlife, by the way. The original tell me more about, where the bird is, how he is, and then what the living environment there. So I do love the original as well.
Good perspective on that.
Right. You have a more perspective of where he lives and what season it is, and then more storytelling than just the bird itself. But they're very lovely, photos. I love it.
Hey,
All
John,
right. Yes.
curiosity, and then partially to Howie's point, what happens if you crop to the right, just to the right of that tree? Get a little bit tighter, yeah. So it's still environmental, but you lose some of the.
Yep.
Yeah, I like the sunny afternoon, appearance and feeling of the background. I think that definitely adds to the picture.
I'm gonna build on what Nikki was talking about before. Try something here. What if we do this? For that mask, and then just pull down that exposure a little bit. What do you think about that?
Yep.
Nice, yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that I suspect that's some form of acorn. Yeah, I think that adds a lot to the image. We could really have a good caption contest with this one, don't you think?
Well, sure, in focus, the bird is looking sharp.
What you did there.
Nice.
This might benefit from some additional light in the foreground.
Okay.
I don't know if there's anything, interesting there. I suspect there could well be.
I'm just pulling up the shadows to see what is
Yeah.
there.
Right. And it looks like
Any thoughts on this one?
I really like all the layers out in the sky and the haze.
yeah, maybe I was thinking maybe some dehaze and contrast to bring out those kind of steps of not horizon, but yeah. I mean, there's certainly haze. I mean, last year, geez, I was traveling around. There were states that were just real hazy, if not full on smoky, with all the fires.
Hey, John, maybe brighten the foreground area, the grassy area. See what happened.
You mean like with a linear gradient or something?
Yeah.
I don't want to
It
do
was
too
sort
much.
of dark to start with. You might be introducing
Yeah.
nuance, but worth a shot.
But given that this is evidently a sunset shot, right? So if given that the camera is behind these hills, these are probably supposed to be a little bit dark, but you still want to see some level of detail here, right? I guess what I'm looking for is looking for that right balance of bringing out that detail in the foreground without it looking too unnatural. And it's a balancing act, but I think you guys are on the right track with pulling out some of that detail in the foreground, right? What do you get? What do you think about a square crop here? Do you think that works better than the vertical?
If we see a little bit more on the bottom, might be better. Like original one, original crop.
And let me show the original crop again.
See, yeah, I mean, to me, I kind of infer the intent of the photograph is not the bushes down below, but rather that this cleft in the rock, you know, where the waters come around and doing that whole meander thing, but that it's sending your eye out to the progressive, you know, horizons rather than the foreground. And so, yeah, I mean, there's sort of a trade-off there, lightening the foreground, and it's like not, I mean, the bush, the foreground, once it was revealed to me, it's not all that interesting compared to, well, like rocks and the stuff in the background.
Okay. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, you know, when you put the image up on the screen, my eye, I think that was the intent of the photographer, was immediately drawn through the V shape into the various layers. And so once you turned up the foreground and I had to, you know, looking close to the monitor pixel peeking with just 2 eyes, I find all the foreground stuff light and distracting. What I really am interested in is all that depth and layer miles and miles out. And so playing with the contrast and the haze and the like, because I think the V framing the image, maybe crop it up some from the bottom, so maybe just below the V. But I'm really interested in what is beyond the V.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got to keep enough in there to make it a V, right?
Right.
But maybe something like that.
And then playing with the various things to
Yeah, I mean, if you can use dehaze and maybe contrast and clarity and texture in the what is out, you know, within the outside, within the V, outside the V, beyond, you know, what
Into the beyond.
yes, there we go.
John, I look at this and I see a black and white because you've got some very sharp, you've got
Yeah, that's nice.
real contrast that can pop. I might lighten the foreground a little bit, you know, and pop
In a
the
black and
depth.
white, that might make more sense. Yeah.
Yeah, I think this one to me really screams black and white. I mean, the orange is pretty, but it's kind of almost a monotone because the rocks are probably seem to be red too, so you don't have any, but I think the contrasts and
Yeah, contrast and detail, if you can bring that out. Yeah, dehaze definitely in there if you're going black and white to bring out those features. I mean, there they are. It's interesting, but you know, if you're looking at the whole picture, more distinction, I think, helps the picture.
Yeah, and this is probably where tools in Photoshop would help pull out some of that contrast, tonal contrast in the background a little bit better than what Lightroom can do.
Is there a raw filter in Lightroom?
Lightroom is, I don't know what you mean by raw filter.
No.
Well,
no,
in
you can't
Photoshop, there's a filter that's camera raw filter, and it has those.
That's the same thing as
That is Lightroom.
Lightroom, basically. Yeah.
Yeah.
Their setup panels are slightly different, but they basically do the same thing.
Yeah. Well, in which case, yeah, it would be dehaze, clarity, and texture are the three in a little group that could, I think, bring out some of the detail beyond the V.
Okay.
I guess I'll play devil's advocate that I kind of like the haziness and the original image better. I like a little bit more negative space on the bottom, but the just the way you got these different tonal values as you go back really leads your eye back through the image, and nice layering all the way through. I think is very attractive.
Any other comments?
Where is it? Anybody, is the photographer present? I was thinking Texas or New Mexico, but
Certainly looks like the Southwest, doesn't it?
well, yes.
Of course it does. We're looking at a Bugs Bunny Roadrunner cartoon.
No, this ain't Roadrunner. Well, there's a nice, very nice.
Okay, that's where I could see a little strip of pavement going off into the distance with a Roadrunner. Beep beep. Yeah.
I kind of like it without the road.
Yeah. Yeah. This definitely harkens back to a different era.
This is really pretty, but what my eye immediately saw was the spot of light on the rock. That does not look natural. Maybe it is, but it doesn't look natural.
And you can totally
So
make that go away.
I think we're looking at a sun flare there.
Probably.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, stopped way down. You can see the, the streaming of light from, what do they call that? There's this name for that effect, but
Crepuscular rays.
yeah. And the further your aperture, the more stopped down you are, the more pronounced. That
Oh, you're
effect.
talking about the starburst effect. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And a great star there. That's really nice. They captured it at the right moment, right as soon as that sun hit the top of the mountains.
Yeah, and it's not, there's enough, I don't know, atmosphere or whatever. It's not blown out. You can actually see it. You could go and clone that thing out and see if it looks any better.
Well, we could try that. Let's
Yeah, close up, it's starting to look somewhat artifactual. I didn't know if it was put there that the intent was to kind of establish, a line from the light spot to the the source of the light spot.
I don't think it was put there because it's on that greenery as well. That
Oh yeah, it is. You're right.
sitting there too. So
Mhm.
it's just some sun flare,
Yeah.
which I don't mind sun flare. I know a lot of people don't like it, but I don't mind it. Oh,
Hey, Tim, what do we see here, Tim?
Looks like dust spots.
Oh, and looky
No, those
here.
are sunspots.
Tim, you need to clean your camera.
So this is an example where, as we turn this tool on, I was talking earlier about how this tool can help highlight spots that are barely, if at all, visible with the naked eye. Here's an example of one.
Mm-hmm.
This
Well,
one
and
really brings it
zooming
out.
in too. I find
this
zooming in
definitely
brings out stuff.
Zooming in and then moving the image will help highlight the spot
That too,
naturally.
Yes.
So obviously there's some sensor dust. Oh my goodness, look at all this sensor dust. So how's this version look?
Lens. When you're out in the field, we have to keep cleaning out the front end of our lenses.
How's this version look?
Okay, except for the thing over the bottom left-hand corner.
John had dust spots.
What we were looking at was actually the version that I took into Photoshop before I cleaned up the spots and got rid of the sun flare.
So is that near Big Bend or?
It is Big Bend National Park. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
So I'll tell you so that was Big Bend. This is at Sotal Vista. This is the window in Chisos Basin. And this is the version that I finished up with in Photoshop. That's my final crop on the bird. And that was my shot there too.
And what was that event?
That was a drift racing event at Summit Point Raceway in West Virginia. So here's one I don't know if you guys can tell. This is actually a moonlight shot. The full moon is rising behind me, illuminating the window in Chisos Basin, and you can see the stars in the sky.
Oh, yeah. I don't know, kind of quickly off of point, but because I arrived late, but the night of the 15th and the 16th, the full lunar eclipse, if anybody has particular plans to photograph it.
Looking at the weather this weekend, it's supposed to rain. I kind of gave up on that.
We might not see it.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you ain't there.
So this one, and real quick, this is what I was going to illustrate. This is kind of like the sand dune shot. As it is, it's kind of like, but if we, we crop in, add a little bit of contrast treatment, come in here, zoom it in a little bit, pull this down, find an interesting spot in the rocks, crop that in. It makes for, in my opinion, a more compelling image.
Yeah, the forms, instead of being just a jumble that we don't really, I mean, now individual ridges and features become recognizable.
Yeah, so I took it into Photoshop, added a little tonal contrast, did a selective dodging and burning to bring out highlight some of the texture that I think it was Audrey talking about in the sand dune shot, bringing out some of that, the lighting effects on the hills. But again, I was using that as an example of, finding shots within the full image. And there's one.
I love that. Nice.
Yeah, and it was interesting, but so there's interesting ways that you can play with some of the lens correction and transform, and just play with things like the aspect ratio and tilt it back a little bit. And if you take it into Photoshop and play with some of the tilting effects, you can end up with that shot. That's actually a completely different angle on the camera, but it is the same leaf. I don't know if you can see that, but
almost looks like an octopus, the tentacles.
Almost.
Great shot.
That's cool.
So this is one, I mean, I just was walking, I was literally taking trash to the trash can around the house, and I just happened to see the raindrops do effectively on this leaf. So I went in, I grabbed my micro shot and handheld took these shots. But again, I was gonna bring this out just to highlight moving the lens and the perspective of the camera just a little bit makes all the difference sometimes. Oof. Is there any detail in this shot? Anybody?
Well, let's bring the exposure down and maybe the dehaze, depending on.
Oh, look at, okay, here we go. Back onto something here.
There's a little something there to save.
Ah, add a little bit of clarity. Huh.
Yeah,
So
maybe
that is
crop
an
the-
example. Yeah, so
Crop out your
that
foreground.
Yeah, the
All the blues?
foreground is really not contributing much other than being blurry.
yeah, so we could crop that out maybe. Yeah, crop some of that out, or I don't know, another way that we could consider maybe. Let me hit done on that. Maybe just black and white.
I still think
Make-
cropping just above that front bush that's out of focus would be
Here,
better.
here. Yeah, I mean,
There you
now
go.
you can mess with the margins on the sides, but yeah, that bush was taking the picture hostage, I think.
Yeah, and that was definitely, and again, in case you couldn't figure it out, that was my shot as well. This is what I ended up with on the final. I agree with you. The foreground was my challenge on this one, and frankly, if I had used a smaller aperture, stop down the lens, it probably would have been a stronger image. But the foreground really isn't helping here. But so I brought it over here in Photoshop and basically just worked to de-emphasize it. Still not perfect. You're absolutely right. Cropping out this foreground probably would strengthen the image. But again, what I did is I just took it into Photoshop, did some silver effects, index silver effect treatment on it to bring out the texture of the mountains in the background. Which again, for me, it was all about the texture on this one.
Sure.
This is Guadalupe Mountains National Park here.
Yes.
But again, what it really was what I really wanted to demonstrate to some folks who may not have tried this. This is the exposed to the right concept. And when you first look at this, you might think there is no detail. I mean, look at that histogram, like slammed up to the right. There, how in the world is there any detail there? And well, even if you just hit the auto button, it starts to become clear. But the trick there is if you expose the image as brightly as you can make the image without flipping the highlights. And what do we mean by that? Stop me if everybody's heard this before, but basically, if you're looking at the histogram on the right and everything is literally touching the right edge and the top is really where it's clipping, then you're blowing out your highlights. So then you would want to turn your exposure down a little bit until nothing is clipping. And at that point, your camera sensor is capturing all of the possible detail in that image. But coming out of the camera is going to look like this. It's going to be completely washed out, and you may think there's no detail in there, but as you could see, you can recover a huge amount of the content there.
And that's the beauty of shooting raw, right?
And that is an advantage of shooting raw. Now, it's not for everybody. I'm not saying that everybody should. I shoot everything raw because even if it's just a snapshot, all right, fine, pull it in a Photoshop, click the auto button. It usually looks good enough for a snapshot. And if it's something that I want to hang on my wall, I've got every bit of that data that the sensor could possibly capture to play with. But anyway, this was, I intended this really just as an example of exposed to the right. Okay, that is it, folks. Again, great participation from the crew tonight. I hope this was beneficial to everyone.
Hey, can I ask a question before we end?
Please do.
For the food photography this month, what's the limit or of what's considered food, I guess?
And that is a very good question. So let's go to the webpage. Let's see what we put out here for that. That's not what I want. I want event schedule. Here we go. And let's see here. So food. Still life image of food for humans.
Oh, you constrained it.
Not dog food.
So is liquid included, like drink, or
why not
solid food?
I'm going to go back to still life image of food for humans.
Yeah, still life of a bowl of liquid. I guess that there would be a bowl that would sort of make it still life.
Oh, some still life
I
show
would consider
bottles.
soup food. I think you're fine. The soup is food, right?
So I I thought I had updated this, but obviously I did not. We actually do have a judge for this competition.
Yeah.
That judge is well known for their food shots.
No.
One might say, perhaps even worldwide. I mean, this guy has been, many places around the world taking excellent photos of all sorts of ethnic cuisines from all corners of the globe. And I believe that gentleman is on the line tonight.
It's me. Secrets out.
Yeah, Pat has agreed to be our judge for this month's competition on food. So Pat may be willing to weigh in on Tim's question.
It can be anything that's food. It can be drink. It can be even ingredients. It doesn't have to be like cooked food. Anything that represents food, vegetables, anything. I'm pretty open about that.
Tim, does that answer your question adequately?
That does. Thank you.
All right. Any other feedback, comments?
This was great, very helpful as usual. So,
Yes,
thanks, everyone.
this was good. Thanks, John.
You're welcome. I'm going to hit the stop on sharing, and I'm going to hit stop on the recording.